So the final 3 episodes of Legend of Vox Machina Season 2 have been released, and wow, they somehow managed to make Grog's story even better. Today on FraudOnTheTele, we're going to be discussing episode 10 of Season 2 of Legend of Vox Machina and how the animated show actually somehow managed to make Grog's story better than in the campaign. You see, episode 10 of Legend of Vox Machina is a tale of 2 halves, the first being devoted to Grog, as this is the culmination of Season 2's story arc for him, as he looks to answer the question, where does his strength come from? As he looks to face down his uncle Kevdak, the leader of the Herd of Storms, the barbarian tribe that Grog once belonged to. As well, he is the wielder of the vestige of the Divergence, the Titan Stone Knuckles, and just overall, not a nice man. As we said, Grog's story in Legend of Vox Machina largely revolves around this question that is posed to him by Earthbreaker Grun early on in Vasselheim in Season 2. Where does your strength come from? Where we last left off, the party had gotten split up, Vex, Keyleth, Vax, and Percy teleporting to the Feywild to retrieve the bow Fenthris, while Grog, Pike, and Scanlan have found themselves in Western, Grog having some of his strength sucked from him, as remember, he destroyed the cursed blade Craven Edge. Our episode begins as Grog is challenging his uncle Kevdak to single combat, and yeah, it goes as well as you might think it does, with Grog getting his ass kicked in a fist fight with the Titan Stone Knuckles. Grog puts up his best fight to best of his ability, but he's no match for Kevdak alone, especially not in this weakened state. As Grog fights, Scanlan and Pike watch on, hidden in the wreckage, until suddenly the worst happens. Kevdak sees Pike. Now, I need to give credit where credit is due here. This next scene is arguably one of the best scenes in this entire season. As the Herd now hold Pike and Scanlan hostage, Grog shouts out, "Don't hurt my friends," as he pushes forward, attacking Kevdak again. Kevdak easily repels him though, as he grabs the smaller barbarian, pushing his back into a wooden spike, impaling him in this extremely violent scene taken straight out of the campaign. Kevdak then does possibly one of the most evil things a character could do. With Grog impaled, suffering in pain, he walks over to Pike, Grog's best friend, the woman who saved him, the woman who believes in him. Kevdak yells out, "Who wants to watch the bitch's head pop?" as he steps on Pike, slowly crushing her beneath his boot. Grog screams out in anguish, both at the physical pain that he is in and at the emotional pain as he is being forced to watch his best friend die, tears beginning to run down his face as he looks on at Pike. It's then the music shifts. Snow begins to fall around Grog as we hear the voice of Earthbreaker Grun once more. Grog Strongjaw, where does your strength come from? Grog screams out, "What strength? Can't you see how weak I am?" It's then in that moment of need, he realizes the answer. His strength doesn't come from a weapon. It doesn't come from magic powers. His strength comes from his friends, from protecting them and their lives. As Grog realizes this, he screams out his famous line, "I would like to rage," his muscles returning to his normal size as he charges towards Kevdak, breaking off of the pike which has impaled him. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. This scene fucked me up emotionally. I only cried once in these series of episodes, and it was at this scene, at this moment. This scene was absolutely amazing. The emotion we see in Grog and Pike's eyes is just mwah. It's just so freaking good, man. I'm going to speak more about this later, but a lot of these emotional scenes are so important because of the level of violence that this show is willing to display. Your heart aches watching Grog suffer, watching him be brutally punished, but your heart doesn't break until you see Kevdak threaten even a small portion of that violence against someone so wholesome and sweet like Pike, that it triggers all of these insane emotions inside of you. Now, if you guys have watched some of my other Critical Role and Legend of Vox Machina content, you would know that Grog is one of my favorite characters. I absolutely adore Travis Willingham, and it makes me really happy to see the writers, the story writers for Legend of Vox Machina, do Grog justice. Too many times in Campaign 1, it felt like Grog was just a side character within the group, a supporting character, a character there for comedic relief, and to obviously be the muscle and the tank in most of the combats. Largely, this seemed due to the fact that Travis, at this time, was still kind of new to Dungeons & Dragons. This is the early parts of Critical Role we're talking about here. And two, the fact that his character, Grog, isn't really the sharpest tool in the shed. He's not very bright. He's not very charismatic, is he? Thus, it seemed like Travis played him in this way, in much more of a reserved way, as it wouldn't make sense for Grog to be the leader or to plan, as he's not smart enough to come up with a lot of these ideas. Every character you see in Campaign 1 had kind of their own little mini story arc that took place during the course of the whole campaign. Their time in the spotlight as the main character, if you will. This Kevdak battle is very much Grog's moment to shine as the main character in the story. And I have to give the folks at Titmouse credit. They absolutely crushed it. And I'm gonna say it. Grog's story in Legend of Vox Machina is a hell of a lot better than his story in Campaign 1. Grog fights back valiantly against Kevdak, but again, he is knocked to the ground. Kevdak is just too strong, especially in a fist fight with the vestiges of the Divergent, as he uses the knuckles to enlarge himself. With Grog pinned on the ground, Kevdak begins to mock him, asking him, "What made you think you could stop me? What made you think you could face me?" Grog, with blood in his mouth, barely strains out a single word. Friends. As the camera moves back to Kevdak, we see the shadows of some familiar figures moving from rooftop to rooftop in the background. Grog repeats again, "My strength comes from my friends," as he shouts out one of his most iconic lines from Campaign 1, "Vox Machina, fuck shit up," as the full party of Vox Machina has assembled, ready to fight. Now, the fight scene that follows is probably one of my favorites so far throughout this entire animated series. This very Metallica-esque music, played by Scanlan, begins to play in the background as the party go to town, brutally murdering and fighting the horde of barbarians. Grog manages to cut off Kevdak's arm. Fun fact, this is a nice reference to what actually happened in Campaign 1. As this fight in Campaign 1, the party made a concerted effort to try to cut off Kevdak's arms so he would be separated from his vestiges. But it seems that it's too little too late, as the party begin to be overwhelmed by the herd of Storm. It's then that Vex makes a daring play, grabbing Grog in her pocket plane necklace and dropping him on Kevdak. As he falls, Grog lets out a mighty swing, cleaving the man in two, the fight ending. These scenes were so freaking violent, man, and I loved every minute of it. I've compared this show in previous videos to the Castlevania animated series, especially in how it depicts violence. You see, it took me a little while to understand this, but Legend of Vox Machina doesn't just throw in violence for violence sake. The violence is there to make you care. It's there to add further tension. It creates a sense of dread, a sense of consequences in this world where you know that characters can and will die. Like we said earlier, this entire scene that we have with Grog, Kevdak, and Pike is not nearly as emotional if we hadn't seen the levels of violence that Kevdak is capable of. This creates that real sense of urgency, that real sense of threat, and it suspends your disbelief that, oh my god, Pike could actually die here. They could make her die here. Even though she didn't die here in the campaign, it still made me think that possibly she could die here. It's not violence for violence sake. It's violence there to drive a story narrative, to drive a point home. It makes everything all the more impactful. It raises the stakes, and I loved every minute of it. You see, Legend of Vox Machina Season 2 has made a lot of changes from the story of Campaign 1. Dare I say more changes than what Season 1 of Legend of Vox Machina did. I mean, much of the events leading up to the face-off with Kevdak were changed, and the duel itself was largely changed, but it was done, in my opinion, to add value and weight to the story. In the campaign, Vox Machina were all together from the start in Western here, and they had devised a plan to ambush the Herd of Storms to take out Kevdak. They would allow Grog to challenge him in this one-on-one combat, and then Grog would give the signal for Vox Machina to unleash an ambush. It was all planned from the very start. Now, what I remember was that Pike did get in severe danger in this fight, but it was never in a situation like where Kevdak was about to kill her like we saw in the animated show. You see, in my opinion, the showrunners have done an amazing job taking creative liberties here in Season 2 of Legend of Vox Machina, but while still hitting many of the very important narrative, story beats, and even direct quotations from Campaign 1. In order to make the story of Legend of Vox Machina even better, it did need some streamlining, which only makes sense seeing as this is a massive Dungeons & Dragons campaign with hundreds of hours of content. But it just makes more sense what the showrunners did here for the characters and the flow of the story. Throughout Season 2, we see all of our characters struggle with personal problems and personal stories, all while a larger narrative, like the Coma Conclave, is being played out. These stories all do come from Campaign 1, but you see the folks over at Titmouse have managed to elevate these personal character stories even more, in my opinion. And I think none needed it more than Grog in his story specifically. I say this every single week, it feels like, but Legend of Vox Machina continues to blow me away, man, and take me by surprise. Season 2 was somehow even better than Season 1, and I can't even imagine how I'm going to feel about Season 3 when it comes out next year. At the end of the day, I love what Titmouse has done here with the Grog story. I love all of the changes, really, that they've made so far in the Legend of Vox Machina animated series. I feel like a lot of the times they add more depth and meaning, especially to Grog's story and to his character, something that I feel like he desperately needed and deserved. Once again, I'm gonna say it. Legend of Vox Machina has made Grog's story better than in the campaign, and I'm all here for it. As always, if you enjoyed the video or learned something new, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Keep your eye out for future Legend of Vox Machina videos coming out, covering episodes 11 and 12, where we'll be going into detail on all of those Vax, Raven Queen scenes, and all of those changes that happened in this fight with Umbrasyl. As well, expect a full review of Season 2 of Legend of Vox Machina in the coming weeks. And as always, guys, I hope to see you in the next video. Stay safe out there, man. I've pleasantly enjoyed making these videos for you guys. As always, I hope to see you in the next one. Until next time, peace, love, adieu.
A love story that might be. We wasn't supposed to happen. So much talk around us. We became numb to the yapping. It was like 05. Got my license to drive. Picked you up in my pop's car. Went for a ride. Couldn't no one tell us nothing. That night was ours. All the stars.